So good morning, my name is Reverend Zoe, and I'd like to welcome you all here to chapel today, and I would also like to welcome our YouTube audience today also. So for this morning's theme is rescue, and when Reverend Jack told me that this theme was rescue, the first thing that popped into my head was a really strange thing. It was a quote from the movie Scrooge. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the movie Scrooge, it's a really good movie about starring Bill Murray as a guy called Frank Cross. He's a self-centered, financially driven television producer who is working on a remake of the Dickens classic Scrooge and happens to fall into his own encounters with the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. The quote I immediately thought of was one that he said to his ex-girlfriend Claire, who was trying to assist some volunteers that were working for her when she told Frank they needed help. And he said to her, "I'm going to give you a little advice, Claire. Scrape them off. You want to save somebody? Save yourself." She responds by sarcastically telling him that this is a really nice attitude to have, Frank, especially around Christmas. But that quote stuck with me. Sure, it's jarring to hear someone who is in their own self-centeredness and tell his ex to save yourself. But when we think about it, there actually is some truth to what he is saying, and not simply in that selfish way that he intended it to mean. There are a few main things that we need to think about and look at as we think about what is behind this, and think about the roles that we have played in our lives in relationship to ourselves as well as in relationship to our loved ones. What Frank Cross was saying was to put yourself first at the expense of everyone else. But the opposite of this is putting everyone else first at the expense of ourselves. Neither one of these is workable because we end up focusing on someone or something else as a problem that needs fixing, rather than learning how we need to maybe work with that person and ourselves based on their needs just as much as our own. We also must recognize that when we focus on them as the problem, we fail to see the activating experiences that we may be having that have led to our own feelings of brokenness. And therefore, by seeking to rescue another person, we fall into the trap, whether intentionally or unintentionally, of controlling them, and therefore taking away their autonomy and their power. An excellent quote from Rachel Naomi Remen, who did a speech on the subjects of helping, fixing, and serving, reads, "Helping, fixing, and serving represent three different ways of seeing life. When you help, you see life as weak. When you fix, you see life as broken. When you serve, you see life as whole. Fixing and helping may be the work of the ego, and service, the work of the soul." When we think of rescuing another person, it can come from a positive place. We want the very best for them. And we may be seeing how they are harming themselves, and we want to help them make that right. The risk, however, could mean us thinking that we know what's best for them, and as I said earlier, taking away their ability to make choices for themselves. The other risk is that because we're in the middle of this situation, we don't see the forest for the trees and maybe aren't as fully aware of the pain or the grief that we might be feeling as a result of our loved one going down a path that we may not agree with. Maybe the path is that they're not living into what our hopes and dreams were for them. Or maybe the path is their substance or alcohol use. Whatever it is, we must allow ourselves the ability to understand that we can be there for them in whatever capacity we may feel able to. But we cannot fix them. We cannot save them. Going back to the main point of Frank Cross's quote, the only person who can save them is themselves. And to some degree or another, we all are in need of saving, sometimes from ourselves, as much as being the one that needs to make the decision to want to be saved. Now, something I say regularly is that it's easier to know what the next right thing to do is than actually do it. All right, I'm going to do a little poll here for those of you who are present. How many of you all here know that you can give really good advice? I mean, you know the sort of things that people need and you can give really good advice. How many people know that? Put your hands up. Right. So if those same people have put your hands up, how many of you all recognize that actually taking that advice is harder? It's easier to give advice, but practically living into that advice can be really difficult. Yeah, pretty much. Same amount of hands went up in the air. It's easy to know what the next right thing to do is, but the struggle becomes real when we actually have to make practical choices to practically apply those things that we intellectually know we need to do for ourselves. That's when it becomes difficult, when we have to put those things that we know what to do into practical application. Struggle is real, folks, am I right? Yeah? So the other day, a friend and I were talking about a mutual situation we were both experiencing. And she said to me, I wish I had the words of advice I could give, but I'm struggling in this area too. And you know something? I didn't want words of advice. I didn't want words of advice at all, because exactly that. I know what to do. But it was more meaningful to me that she was there with no words. I mean, the reality is, this situation that we were both dealing with, nothing could be changed about the situation. But having her there not giving advice, just witnessing and listening and understanding me, really, really understanding me, was more meaningful than anything that could have been done to try and fix whatever may have been perceived as being broken or help whatever may have been perceived as weakness. Service, on the other hand, that third point, service, comes from a sense of mutual support that recognizes we are not alone in whatever we're going through. But neither are we there to try and help, fix each other. Rather, what we've experienced is witnessed by the other person. Like I said earlier, witnessed by another person. We see this to some degree in some of our recovery programs. Let's look at Smart Recovery for a moment. It's a program that's based on recognizing that people can feel powerless over many things, including their substance or alcohol use disorder, and seeks for people to become self-empowered through the guidance of their own designed recovery program and through mutual support through the folk who both facilitate and attend meetings and the relationships that are built up between those people. In many of the 12-step programs, not limited to AA, Al-Anon, NA, Nor-Anon, the first step mentions the word powerless, but is actually recognizing that powerless is a past tense word. The reality is you've taken your power back over ultimately something that's become an abusive relationship and has been trying to destroy us. Regardless of whether we're the person who has an active alcohol or substance use disorder, or our family, or whether it's our family member or friend who has that. The meetings we attend may give us hope, but the real work is done through the connections we make at those meetings. Again, the mutual support that we receive when we're at these meetings and outside of these meetings, any of these meetings. Mutual support can only come about as we build relationship with others. It comes about as we begin to learn how to risk trusting others. And let's be honest here, another show of hands. How many of you all recognize that trust has been one of the first things to go in your relationships? Or maybe it's hanging on by a thread. Come on, let's be real here. Okay, so that's a lot of us here. So the idea of risking trusting others can be quite a struggle, especially with past experiences of getting hurt by those we love, or maybe hurting those we love, and the feelings of shame or guilt associated with any actions we may have done. So as we begin to show up at meetings, maybe listen and hear if something stands out to us, we may risk trusting a simple hello or allow ourselves to be greeted by someone. Maybe we might even, risk sharing just a little bit of superficial information, but, keep it on that level, because trusting is scary. We may not be ready to have anyone see the depth of our woundedness. And what we might hear in these meetings about this concept of higher power and whatever that is, and how that's supposed to save us, and what the heck does that even mean? So a phrase that I have used regularly, which is more contemporary, is source of guidance, or another way of putting it is source of strength. Source of strength, one patient said to me, she remembered it because the initials of source of strength are SOS. And we all know that SOS is a translation of Save Our Souls, which is like one of those cries out that we do when, ships are in distress or something like that. So source of strength, SOS, Save Our Souls. So if we look at it in those terms, this concept of higher power, power greater than ourselves, sense of source of strength, what is the purpose of that source of strength? And why do our 12-step programs talk about it? And is this actually something that is supposed to save or rescue us? What purpose does it actually have? As we're starting out and recognize the need that we do need to begin trusting again, we have to learn with trusting anything. It takes relationship building. A quote I heard once said that in any relationship, trust is the last thing to develop and the first thing to go. It doesn't make a difference if that relationship is with another person or something such as God, universe, nature, energy, the concept of love, a support community, or something else. Developing a relationship with that SOS, source of strength, is more important than simply having an intellectual understanding of what it is, or simply knowing its name. There's a saying that says, having a gym membership doesn't make you any more healthy than standing in a garage makes you a car. Having an intellectual understanding of a source of strength, by whatever name you call it, is different than being in relationship with it. And sometimes there may be good reason not to feel like you want to be in relationship with whatever that is, whatever you've been brought up to believe is a higher power or source of strength. Say, for example, if you were hurt or mistreated as a child or adult by people who took your power away from you, and it wasn't there to rescue you, or rather, the people who used their free will that they were given and abused it by using it in a negative and sometimes evil way towards you. If that's been your situation and it becomes difficult to trust, think about maybe where you have felt potentially safe. It could be in nature, it could be through a support system or group of friends who you have been able to open up to. Maybe talk it out with someone. Maybe use these as your areas of support, your sources of guidance, your sources of strength. Maybe journal about it. Do something that you find helpful. There are lots of options with regards to identifying and changing a relationship or finding a new form of SOS. So allow yourself to explore those options. And if you're not sure of what it may be, if you're a patient here, feel free to ask for a spiritual consult with your spiritual counselor. We are more than happy to help you try and look through that and figure something out. Because building a relationship with anything, whether it's metaphysical out there or even human relationships, takes work. We don't blindly trust something or someone without getting to know it or them. And we will never likely ask for help if we don't feel a sense of trust that that help will be forthcoming. That can be why so many of us struggle to ask for help, because we've been disappointed in ourselves. You see, we've been so disappointed in the past, in ourselves and in others, I should add. People let us down. And that's what the problem with Frank Cross was, from his view of saving yourself. It came from years of his own woundedness and his need to hustle to survive, and as the help of mutual support wasn't there for him. So when a good relationship came along for him, he couldn't recognize it, as he'd gotten so used to, using others to get what he felt he needed and surviving on his own. He couldn't recognize when a good relationship came into his life. So at that time, he threw it away because of his woundedness. Because of his woundedness. Working through that woundedness is a key part of how we begin the process of building trust. Trusting with ourselves as much as trusting with whatever that SOS may be. And it takes risking even the smallest amount of trust to get that process started. On the other hand, blindly trusting without building a relationship can result in disappointment and feeling as if we're a victim. Take the reading we had earlier. For our YouTube audience who didn't get to hear that reading, it was the reading of a man standing on a porch praying to God to save him from the rising flood waters. Someone comes with a boat, and then another person with a speedboat. And then a helicopter comes along, and he says, no, but the Lord's going to save me. The Lord's going to save me. Eventually he does drown, goes to speak to God, and says, God, why didn't you save me? And God was like, well, I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. What more did you want? As we begin to build trust and relationship with whatever an SOS is for us, as I said, it could be God, nature, universe, energy, using love as a higher power guide, or even a support community that we feel connected to, or something else, even potentially relate to our own inner consciousness. It may give us guidance by reminding us of what the next right thing to do is. But once more, to my point of the Scrooged quote, we have to be the ones to do it. We have to be the ones to listen to that guidance and follow that guidance. Our higher power, our SOS can give us direction, but as part of trusting that process, we must learn to respond to whatever it is sending our way. As that man who was praying, his prayers were being answered. He was looking for some kind of sky opening up and Charlton Heston voice booming down from the heavens to rescue him, rather than the mutual support of the people that God worked through, his God worked through, to send him the boats and the helicopter. Again, there are those words, mutual support. As we begin building a relationship with something more ethereal or generalized, and as we begin making connections with what we're asking for and the direction we're being led in, and making choices to take those directions, we may begin to be willing to continue the process of risking trusting other human beings, starting maybe with a sponsor or support person, accountability buddy, whatever, or whoever it is. But remembering that those people are not going to tell us what to do, they're not going to tell us how we should be feeling, but they're going to tell us what they've done to help themselves, and if we want some of that, maybe we want to consider doing the same sort of thing. But ultimately, these are people that have a shared experience, who are not going to tell us what to do, but who are going to journey alongside of us. They're going to witness us just as we will be witnessing them. So being rescued is not about others trying to fix us, implying that we're broken. It's not about others trying to help us, implying that we're weak. But it's about mutual support built on a foundation of trust, even a small amount, as we respond to those people who, whatever that source of strength is, has sent our way. It takes for us to be willing to reach out to it, to be willing to ask it for help, and to pay attention to when and where that help comes from. It takes a recognition that the idea of saving ourselves comes from the reality that we're not doing this with the intention of stepping on others, but rather finding the ability to take our power back from something that has sought to control us and take us away from living the life that we deserve. As you look for your source of strength, be open to how you are building relationship with it, and how and where it is speaking to you. Listen, and then allow yourself to be willing to respond to the trust that you are developing with it, and the power to make healthy decisions rather than allow that which has controlled you to continue to take that power away from you time and time again. Whatever you identify as that source of strength, recognize that it does work through mutual support. And as you build trust in it, you will begin to feel more confident risking trusting others. Find those people who want to accompany you. As you learn to trust them, they will learn to trust you also, and that journey of mutual support continues as you both give and receive insight, support, and the message of hope that comes from the trust that you build in yourself, in your support system, and in your source of strength. Amen.